Hey folks, before the video starts, I want to say big thank you for the feedback you gave me in the last video. Again, I will be short and say, as every other video, to leave a like and hit the subscribe button. Also, don't forget to comment down below, helping me to give proof to YouTube that all of you who follow this channel so far are real people who watch my videos. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy. A dark web page promised to unlock hidden Netflix shows. The show I watched was about my life, but it ends with my murder. Alright, so I never thought I'd be the kind of person to write one of these stories. Honestly, if someone told me 6 months ago that I'd end up in this mess, I would have laughed in their face. But here I am, and no, I'm not crazy. You'll probably think I'm just some random guy making stuff up for internet points, but by the end of this, you'll either believe me or sleep with the lights on. Maybe both. This all started on a random Thursday night. You know the kind. The ones where you're scrolling endlessly because you can't sleep, and your brain decides to latch on to the dumbest things. I was binging random conspiracy theory videos on YouTube. Aliens, Bigfoot, whatever. Then I stumbled onto a guy talking about the dark web. Now, I've heard about the dark web before, but I always assumed it was just a shady place for hackers and creeps. This guy, though, he made it sound different. He said there were pages on there that unlocked hidden features of regular websites. His main example? Netflix. Apparently, there's this underground network of servers that stream shows and movies you can't find anywhere else. Stuff that Netflix doesn't want you to see. Yeah, okay, dude. Sure. But the idea stuck with me. I've been a Netflix junkie for years, and the thought of some secret vault of weird, forbidden content, it was tempting. Way too tempting. So, I did the dumb thing. I downloaded Tor. If you don't know, Tor is basically the browser you use to access the dark web. I was half expecting my laptop to catch fire the moment I opened it, but it looked normal. Just a browser with an ugly interface. After some Googling, or whatever the dark web equivalent is, I found a link labeled Deepflix, Real Original. It claimed to unlock all the hidden libraries of Netflix. A login page popped up, but here's the weird part. Instead of asking for a username and password, it just wanted me to upload a picture of myself. Yeah, I know. Sketchy as hell. But I figured, what's the worst that could happen? It's not like I have any scandalous pictures of myself sitting on my desktop. So I grabbed a selfie I took last week at Starbucks. Don't judge me. Uploaded it and hit enter. The screen went black for a second, and I almost closed the tab, thinking I'd just bricked my laptop. But then, this grainy red text appeared. Welcome, my full name. We've been expecting you. I almost spit out my drink. How the hell did it know my name? My email wasn't linked to this, and I don't even use my real name on Netflix. Before I could process it, the site loaded a Netflix-like interface, but it was off. The thumbnails were blurry, and the titles didn't make sense. Stuff like The Forgotten, Don't Look Away, and The End of All Things. You know, super vague and dramatic. One thumbnail caught my eye, though. It was just called Tonight. No description, no rating, nothing. Just a plain black screen with white text that read, "This show is personalized for you." At this point, I was freaked out, but also kind of intrigued. I clicked play, thinking it would just be some artsy horror movie or something. Instead, the screen showed me, like actual footage of me, sitting in my bedroom. Right then, wearing the exact hoodie I had on and everything. I froze. This wasn't a reflection or some trick of the light. This was a live feed of me. Then the camera on screen moved. It tilted slightly, focusing on the window behind me. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was nothing there. No cameras, no weird devices, just my stupid window and the dark alley behind my apartment. When I turned back to the screen, the feed had changed. Now it was showing footage of me earlier that day, walking into the McDonald's down the street. I recognized the exact moment. It was when I stopped to tie my shoe on the sidewalk. I never posted that anywhere. Nobody was with me. So how? I slammed my laptop shut, my hands shaking. This had to be some kind of elaborate prank, right? Someone hacked my laptop, maybe. But who? And how would they get footage from places I'd been all day? I grabbed my phone to text my best friend, Alex, but my screen lit up with a notification from an unknown number. Don't tell anyone. Keep watching. I didn't recognize the number, but my gut told me whoever sent it was connected to this Deep Flicks site. My first instinct was to block the number, but before I could, another message came through. If you don't watch, we will. What the hell was that supposed to mean? I reopened my laptop, half expecting it to be fried, but the site was still there, still streaming. Me. Only now, it wasn't showing my past. It was showing my future. The screen showed me walking down the alley behind my apartment. I wasn't wearing the hoodie anymore. I had on the coat I'd bought last winter. There was snow on the ground, so it had to be sometime soon. In the video, I stopped, looked around like I'd heard something, and then I screamed. The video cut to static. I'm not a superstitious guy, but that video scared the crap out of me. It felt real, too real, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just some messed up movie. I was watching my life, or at least what was about to happen to it. I shut my laptop again, shoved it under my bed, and turned on every light in my apartment. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I told myself it was all some elaborate scam, deepfakes or whatever. But then, as I walked to work, I noticed something. There was snow in the weather forecast. A lot of snow. The snow started falling that evening. Big, heavy flakes that made everything look like a postcard, except I wasn't feeling cozy or nostalgic. All I could think about was the video. Every time I glanced out my window and saw the snow piling up, my stomach tightened. I wasn't sure what scared me more, the idea that it was just a coincidence, or that it wasn't. I tried to distract myself with normal stuff. You know, Netflix, scrolling TikTok, texting Alex. But even that felt off. Every notification made me jump. Every random post that mentioned snow felt like some kind of twisted sign. And then there was Alex, who kept sending me dumb memes like everything was fine. I didn't tell him anything though, partly because of that creepy message I got, but also because how do you even explain this without sounding insane? Around 11 p.m., I finally gave in to my paranoia and checked my laptop again. I half expected the Deep Flicks site to be gone, but no, it was still there, exactly as I'd left it, like it had been waiting for me. The show tonight was still playing. My heart sank as the screen flickered back to life. This time, the footage was showing me again, but now it looked like live video. There I was, sitting on my couch, staring at the laptop. Same hoodie, same messy hair, same everything. It was like looking in a weird, distorted mirror. Then the camera moved, just like before. It panned slowly, ominously, to my front door. My blood turned to ice. Someone knocked. I froze. My apartment is in a quiet part of town, and I never get visitors that late. I muted the laptop and stared at the door, half expecting it to burst open. Another knock, louder this time. I crept towards the peephole, my heart pounding in my chest like a jackhammer. I tried to be quiet, but the floorboards under my feet had other plans. They creaked loudly enough to make me wince. When I finally looked through the peephole, my stomach dropped. The hallway was empty. No one there. Just silence, broken only by the faint hum of the building's heater. But when I turned back to the laptop, the screen had changed. Now it wasn't showing me. It was showing the hallway outside my apartment. Live. And there, standing just out of frame, was a shadow. I couldn't see a face, or even a clear shape. Just this dark, blurry figure lurking at the edge of the screen. I slammed the laptop shut. Screw this. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every little sound set me on edge. Every creak of the pipes or gust of wind outside felt like someone was coming for me. At one point, I thought about calling the cops, but what was I going to say? Hi, yeah. So there's this dark website that's streaming my life and possibly my future, and now there's a shadow person in my hallway. Yeah, no. By morning, I convinced myself I was just freaking out over nothing. Maybe the knocks were just some neighbor messing around. Maybe the video feed was some weird pre-recorded footage. Maybe I needed a break from caffeine and conspiracy theories. But then, when I went to take out the trash, I saw something that sent chills down my spine. Sitting on the ground right outside my door was a package. No label, no markings, just a plain, unassuming box. I stared at it for what felt like forever, debating whether I should touch it. My brain was screaming, "Don't open it," but my curiosity won out. I grabbed the box, brought it inside, and opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single VHS tape. Yeah, you read that right. A freaking VHS tape. Who even uses those anymore? I don't even own a VCR, so I had no way to play it. At first, I thought it was just some random junk, but then I noticed a piece of masking tape stuck to the front. Written on it, in jagged black marker, was a date. December 12th, 2024. That's 2 days from now. My stomach did a flip. I didn't know what to do. Should I throw it away? Burn it? Take it to the police? But then I remembered the message. If you don't watch, we will. I ended up stuffing the tape in a drawer and spent the rest of the day trying to pretend it didn't exist. But deep down, I knew that was pointless. I couldn't just ignore this. That night, the sight pulled me back in. It was like an itch I couldn't scratch. I opened my laptop, more out of habit than anything, and there it was. The same page, the same creepy interface. Only now, the show tonight had been replaced by something else. Tomorrow. The thumbnail was just a still image of the VHS tape sitting on my desk. My blood ran cold. I hadn't told anyone about it. I hadn't even touched it since I'd thrown it in the drawer. Against my better judgment, I clicked on the video. The footage started with static, but eventually an image flickered onto the screen. It was a close-up of my apartment building, shot from across the street. The camera zoomed in slowly until it was focused on my window. My curtains were drawn, but the faint outline of me, pacing back and forth, was visible through the fabric. The video jumped ahead, and now it was inside my apartment. It was dark, but I could see myself sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling on my phone. The footage was eerily smooth, like whoever was filming had access to some kind of high-end stabilizer. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that in the background, just barely visible in the shadows, was a figure. Tall, blurry, and motionless, like the shadow I'd seen in the hallway footage. I hit pause, my heart racing. Every instinct I had was telling me to run, but where would I even go? Whoever or whatever was doing this clearly had eyes on me. There was no escaping it. Then my phone buzzed. It was another message from the unknown number. Tomorrow, midnight, the alley. I stared at the text, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. My mind raced with questions. Why the alley? Why midnight? Was this some kind of sick game? Or was this the end? I didn't want to go, but something told me I didn't have a choice. The next day was the longest day of my life. Every second dragged on, each minute feeling heavier than the last. I couldn't focus on anything, work, TV, even my own thoughts. My mind kept circling back to that message. Tomorrow, midnight. The alley. I told myself I wasn't going to show up. I wasn't that stupid. But the truth was, I didn't know what else to do. It wasn't just the message. It was everything. The footage, the tape, the knocks on my door. Whoever was behind this had control over my life in ways I couldn't even begin to understand. They'd been watching me, following me, and now they were waiting for me. I spent most of the day sitting at my kitchen table, scrolling through social media like a zombie. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. It didn't matter. I wasn't really looking at anything. I just needed the noise to drown out the silence. At one point, I started typing a message to Alex. Something like, "Hey, if anything happens to me, check my apartment. There's a tape in the drawer by my bed." But I couldn't bring myself to send it. What was I supposed to say? That some shadowy, dark web stalker was coming for me. He'd think I was joking, or worse, losing it. And maybe I was. By 10 p.m., the snow outside had turned into a full-blown storm. The streets were empty, the kind of empty that makes you feel like the last person on earth. I stood by the window, watching the snow swirl under the orange glow of the streetlights. It looked peaceful, almost beautiful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, waiting for me. At 11:30, I opened the drawer and took out the VHS tape. I don't know why. I guess I thought maybe it held some kind of clue. But I still didn't have a VCR, so all I could do was stare at it. The date scrawled on the front seemed to mock me, reminding me that time was running out. Finally, I made up my mind. If I was going to survive this, I needed answers, and the only way to get them was to face whatever was waiting for me in that alley. I bundled up in my thickest coat, shoved my phone in my pocket, and grabbed a flashlight just in case. The streets were eerily quiet as I stepped outside, the fresh snow crunching under my boots. The wind howled through the empty alleyways, carrying with it a biting chill that seeped into my bones. As I walked, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone or something following me. But the streets were deserted. Even the stray cats that usually hung around my building were nowhere to be seen. By the time I reached the alley, it was 11:59. My breath came out in shaky puffs, and my fingers were numb despite the gloves I was wearing. The alley stretched out before me, dark and foreboding, with only a single flickering streetlight at the far end. I didn't see anyone, but that didn't make me feel any safer. If anything, it made me feel worse. I stepped into the alley, my footsteps echoing off the brick walls. The air felt heavier here, like it was pressing down on me, suffocating me. I turned on my flashlight and swept it across the shadows, but there was nothing there. Just empty dumpsters, snow-covered crates, and graffiti-covered walls. And then, just as I was about to turn back, I saw it. a figure at the end of the alley. It was the same shadowy shape I'd seen in the videos, tall and blurry, like it was out of focus even though it was right in front of me. It didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just stood there, watching me. Or maybe waiting. I froze, every instinct screaming at me to run, but my feet wouldn't budge. I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by a fear I couldn't explain. "Who are you?" I finally managed to croak, my voice barely audible over the wind. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it raised one arm and pointed. Not at me, but at something behind me. I spun around, my heart hammering in my chest. The alley was empty, or at least, I thought it was. But then I noticed something on the ground, half buried in the snow. It was another box. This one was smaller than the last, about the size of a shoebox. There were no markings on it, no labels, nothing to indicate where it had come from. I stared at it, unsure whether I should pick it up, but the figure behind me didn't give me much of a choice. When I turned back to face it, it was gone. I crouched down and picked up the box, my hands trembling. It was surprisingly light, like there was barely anything inside. I opened it carefully, half expecting some kind of trap, but all I found was a piece of paper, written on it in the same jagged handwriting as the tape, were 2 words: "Keep watching." I stuffed the paper back in the box and bolted out of the alley, my mind racing. By the time I got back to my apartment, I was out of breath, my face numb from the cold. I locked the door, double-checked it, and then dragged a chair in front of it for good measure. I didn't want to go near my laptop, but I had to know. I opened it, half expecting the sight to be gone, but it wasn't. The show tonight was back, and this time the thumbnail was a live feed of me standing in the alley, holding the box. I hit play. The footage started the same way as before, showing me standing there, looking scared out of my mind. But then it shifted. Now it was showing something I hadn't seen, something behind me. The shadowy figure was there, standing just a few feet away. But it wasn't blurry anymore. It was wearing my face. I slammed the laptop shut so hard, I thought I'd crack the screen. My own face, on that thing. It wasn't just some glitchy shadow anymore. It was me, my face, my expression. But it wasn't natural. Its eyes were too wide, its grin stretched too far, like someone had tried to copy me and failed. For a moment, I couldn't move. My brain felt like it was short-circuiting, trying to process what I'd just seen. Was this some kind of elaborate deepfake, a hallucination, or was it real? And if it was real, what the hell did it mean? I forced myself to take a deep breath, to think rationally. I needed to do something, anything, other than sit there and let the fear swallow me whole. My first instinct was to destroy the laptop, just chuck it out the window, and pretend none of this had ever happened. But something stopped me. It wasn't just the messages or the tape or the box. It was the feeling that if I walked away now, it wouldn't matter. Whatever this was, it wouldn't stop. It would find me anyway. I grabbed my phone and Googled every variation of dark web stalking and horror Netflix hack I could think of. Most of what I found was the same generic stuff. Cautionary tales about staying off tour, Reddit threads about urban legends, and a bunch of conspiracy theories. Nothing that explained what I was dealing with. But then, buried in some obscure forum post from years ago, I found something that made my stomach drop. A user had written about a site similar to Deepflix, one that also required a photo to access. According to them, the site didn't just stream hidden shows, it created them, shows tailored to to whoever logged in, and the endings, they were always the same. I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. The user's last message was hauntingly simple. Whatever you do, don't finish the show. I wanted to believe it was fake, just another creepypasta written by some bored teenager. But it felt too close, too specific. I could practically hear the pieces clicking into place in my head, and none of it felt good. I shut my phone off and paced the room, trying to figure out my next move. But the more I thought about it, the more trapped I felt. If I didn't finish the show, what would happen? Would they come for me anyway? And if I did finish it, what would I see? At some point, I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I knew, I was waking up to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was still dark outside, and for a second, I forgot where I was. Then everything came rushing back. The buzzing was a text, another unknown number. It's almost time. I looked at the clock. 11:45 p.m. My chest tightened. Midnight was creeping closer, and with it, whatever was waiting for me at the end of this nightmare. I considered calling Alex, telling him everything, but what could he do? This was bigger than a random friend swooping in to save the day. This was something else, something I couldn't even begin to understand. I sat back down at my desk, staring at the laptop like it was a loaded gun. My finger hovered over the touchpad. I didn't want to do it. Every fiber of my being was screaming at me to stop, but I clicked the tab anyway. The site loaded instantly, as if it had been waiting for me. The show tonight was still there, but the thumbnail had changed. Now it showed my apartment, my living room to be exact, and in the middle of the room was a figure, standing perfectly still. I whipped around, heart pounding, but the room was empty, or at least it looked empty. I turned back to the screen, and that's when I saw it. The figure wasn't just standing there anymore. It was moving, slowly, deliberately, toward the desk, toward me. I grabbed the laptop and slammed it shut, but it was too late. The air in the room felt different, heavier, like the atmosphere had thickened somehow. My breathing was loud, ragged, and I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears. And then, for the first time, I heard it, a faint sound, barely audible over the noise in my head. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then it grew louder, more distinct. A low, guttural whisper coming from somewhere in the apartment. I stood up, clutching the flashlight I'd left on the desk. The beam of light danced across the walls as I moved, my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep it steady. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice cracking. The whisper stopped. I crept toward the hallway, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The sound didn't return, but I could feel it. That presence, that weight in the air. It was like the shadows themselves were watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. When I reached the bedroom, I stopped. The door was ajar, and there was just enough light to see the outline of the VHS tape on the dresser. I don't know why, but something about it felt wrong, like it didn't belong there. I stepped inside, the floor creaking under my weight. My flashlight swept across the room, and for a moment, I thought I saw something move, a flicker of motion in the corner of my eye. But when I turned, there was nothing there, just me and my own reflection in the mirror. Or so I thought. As I stared at the mirror, something clicked. My reflection wasn't moving the same way I was. It was delayed, just slightly, like it was struggling to keep up. And then it smiled. Not a normal smile. It was the same grotesque grin I'd seen on the screen, stretched too wide, teeth bared like a predator about to strike. I stumbled backward, my flashlight slipping from my hand and clattering to the floor. When I looked up again, the reflection was gone. But I wasn't alone. I couldn't breathe. My legs felt like they were sinking into the floor, rooted in place by pure terror. The room was empty, but I could feel it, that suffocating presence pressing down on me. The reflection was gone, but it had left something behind. A sound, faint, distant, but growing louder with each passing second. A low, rhythmic thudding. Footsteps. They were coming from the hallway. I scrambled to pick up my flashlight, fumbling with it in my shaking hands. The beam flickered to life, bouncing off the walls as I pointed it toward the open door. The sound was closer now, impossibly close, but there was nothing there, just shadows stretching and twisting in the dim light. "Show yourself," I shouted, my voice cracking. It was a stupid thing to say, but fear has a way of scrambling your brain. I didn't know what I expected to happen, maybe some rational explanation to walk through the door, maybe for the noise to just stop and prove I was imagining all of this. But then the footsteps stopped, and I heard the whisper again. This time, it was louder, clearer, a single word repeated over and over, like a chant. "Watch, watch, watch." The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, reverberating through the walls, the floor, the very air around me. I clutched the flashlight tighter, trying to block out the noise, but it was like it was inside my head. I turned back to the dresser, where the VHS tape still sat. The whispering grew louder, almost deafening now, as if the tape itself was demanding my attention. My hands moved on their own, reaching for it, even as every fiber of my being screamed at me to stop. Before I knew it, I was holding the tape, and I knew what I had to do. I ran back to the living room, the whispering fading into an eerie silence as I moved. The laptop was still on the desk, the screen glowing faintly in the dark. I hesitated for a moment, then flipped it open. The site was still there, but the show had changed again. Now it was just a black screen with a single line of text. "Insert the tape." A chill ran down my spine. I didn't have a VCR, but somehow I knew that didn't matter. I placed the tape on the desk, and as soon as I did, the laptop screen flickered. The black void was replaced by static, and then a face. My face. It was staring straight at me, unblinking, its eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Malice? Hunger? I didn't know. Its mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then the screen glitched, and the figure from the alley appeared. It wasn't a shadow anymore. It was fully formed, fully real, and it was in my apartment. The feed showed it standing right behind me, its grin impossibly wide, its hand reaching out toward the back of my neck. I whipped around, but there was nothing there. When I turned back to the screen, the figure was gone. The room on the feed was empty. But then the feed cut to static again, and a new scene appeared. It was me, sitting in the chair, staring at the laptop, just as I was now. Only, it wasn't now. It was later. My coat was gone, my face pale and gaunt, as if I'd aged overnight. And then I saw it. In the video, the figure stepped into view, standing just behind me. It leaned down, whispering something into my ear that I couldn't hear. My future self didn't react, didn't flinch. It was like I couldn't see it, even though it was right there. The screen glitched again, and now the figure was gone. In its place was me, my future self. But my expression had changed. My eyes were empty, lifeless, my mouth twisted into that same grotesque grin. And then, in a voice that wasn't mine, the figure spoke. The end. The laptop screen went black. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. No whispers, no footsteps, no static. Just the sound of my own shallow breathing. Then the whisper came back, softer this time, closer. Watch. I turned, and there it was, standing in the corner of the room, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. My face, my body, but wrong, stretched, distorted, like a corrupted file come to life. It didn't move. It didn't need to. I could feel it pulling me, drawing me in like a moth to a flame. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The last thing I remember was its grin, wide and hungry, as it whispered one final word, goodbye. When I woke up, it was morning. The snowstorm had passed, the sun casting a faint glow over the city. My apartment looked normal. No shadow, no whispering, no sign that anything had happened. But the laptop was gone, and so was the tape. It's been a week since that night, and I still don't know what to believe. Maybe it was all some elaborate prank. Maybe I'm losing my mind. But sometimes, late at night, I feel it. That weight in the air, that presence watching me from the shadows. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, my reflection doesn't smile back. I bought a Tesla from a dark web auction for half the price. The GPS won't stop driving me to cemeteries. Alright, so I know this sounds absolutely insane, but hear me out. I swear this really happened. I'm not some weirdo trying to scare people on the internet. I'm just a guy who made a really, really bad decision. About a month ago, I was scrolling through TikTok in bed when I stumbled across one of those dark web story videos. You know the type. Grainy footage, creepy music, some robotic voice, narrating. Most of the time, I roll my eyes and move on, but this one caught my attention. It was about people buying weird stuff on the dark web, like mystery boxes and hacked devices. Anyway, it got me curious. I didn't want a mystery box or a hacked phone, but the idea of getting something crazy for cheap kind of stuck with me. I'm a sucker for deals. Like, I'll drive an extra 10 miles just to save $2 on gas. So, stupid me decides to Google how to access the dark web. And yeah, it's not that hard to figure out. Fast forward a week. I downloaded Tor, gotten a VPN, and spent hours browsing these sketchy marketplaces. Most of it was scams or downright disturbing. But then I saw it. A 2020 Tesla Model 3, half the price of what it costs at the dealership. The post had pictures, shiny black exterior, spotless interior, barely 10,000 miles on it. They even claimed it was in perfect working condition. The only catch, the seller wanted payment in Bitcoin, and the deal was no refunds, no questions asked. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is where any sane person would back out, but I had the money. A while back, I'd invested in Bitcoin as a joke when it was dirt cheap, and now I had just enough sitting in my wallet to cover the cost. I convinced myself that it wasn't that sketchy. I mean, people buy cars from Craigslist all the time, right? What's the difference? So, I bought it. The whole process was weirdly easy. Too easy, looking back. The seller didn't ask for much info, just my name, email, and an address for delivery. I figured I'd be waiting weeks, but 2 days later, I got a text. Your delivery is scheduled for 10 p.m. tonight. Please be home to sign delivery at 10 p.m. Yeah, red flag number 1. But again, I brushed it off. Maybe they wanted to avoid traffic or something. That night, I sat on my porch, waiting. At exactly 10 p.m., a flatbed truck pulled up. Two guys in black hoodies unloaded the car, barely said a word, and handed me a single key card. They didn't even ask for a signature, like the text said. Before I could ask any questions, they were back in the truck and gone. The car was gorgeous. I mean, it looked exactly like the pictures, sleek, spotless, and somehow even had that new car smell. I couldn't believe my luck. I snapped a few pictures and posted them to my Instagram story with some lame caption like, "Finally joined the Tesla Club." By the time I went to bed, I was already planning my first drive. I'll be honest, by the time the sun went down, I was feeling weird about the whole situation. The car itself was fine. Better than fine, honestly. It handled like a dream, and every time I walked past it in the driveway, I couldn't help but admire how perfect it looked. But the GPS thing, that was messing with me. Around 9 p.m., I got this itch to take it out for another spin. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. Or maybe I was just hoping the whole cemetery thing was some stupid coincidence. I grabbed the key card and headed out. The neighborhood was quiet, one of those nights where even the crickets seemed to take a break. As soon as I slid into the driver's seat, the Tesla's screen lit up with this low, soft hum. For a second, I thought I saw something again, static, or maybe a face. It was gone before I could blink, replaced by the usual home screen. I shook my head, blaming my imagination. I tapped the GPS. This time, I didn't type anything. I just stared at the map, waiting. At first, nothing happened. Then, without me touching anything, the map zoomed out. It hovered over my town for a moment, then scrolled to a random location about 15 minutes away. A cemetery. Okay, what the hell? I muttered. I tried backing out of the map, but the screen froze again. This time, the entire system rebooted. When it came back on, the destination was locked in. I didn't even hit start, but the car's autopilot engaged, and it began backing out of my driveway. I'm not gonna lie, I panicked. I scrambled to turn the autopilot off, but the steering wheel didn't respond. Even slamming on the brakes did nothing. The Tesla just kept moving, smooth as ever, guiding itself down my street. I was yelling at the car at this point, like that was gonna help. Stop! Cancel! Turn off autopilot! Nothing worked. By the time we hit the main road, I was sweating bullets. The car obeyed every traffic law perfectly, stopping at lights, signaling turns, but it was heading straight for the cemetery. The cemetery. When we pulled into the cemetery's gravel lot, I half expected the car to just stop. But no, it kept going. The headlights cut through rows of headstones, the beams bouncing as we rolled over uneven ground. Finally, the car stopped at this random patch of grass, surrounded by crooked gravestones that looked like they hadn't been visited in decades. The screen went dark, except for one message in bold white letters. Get out. Nope, 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 I said out loud. I wasn't about to step foot outside, especially not here. I tried restarting the car, but the button didn't respond. I grabbed my phone to call someone, anyone, but there was no signal. That's when I noticed something moving outside. At first, I thought it was the wind. One of those cheap plastic flowers someone had left on a grave was spinning like crazy. But then I realized it wasn't just the flower. Shadows were shifting between the headstones, like they were alive. I locked the doors. For a few minutes, nothing happened. I just sat there, heart pounding, watching the shadows flit around like they were playing some kind of game. Then, out of nowhere, the Tesla's horn blasted. It wasn't a quick honk. It was this long, drawn-out blare that echoed through the cemetery, loud enough to make my ears ring. The shadows stopped moving. That's when I saw it. Someone, was standing at the edge of the headlights. They weren't moving, just standing there, half hidden in the darkness. I couldn't make out their face, but they were tall and thin, almost unnaturally so. The horn stopped, and the car's screen lit up again. This time, it was a live feed from the rear camera. There was someone behind the car too. The voices. I don't remember much about what happened next, because my brain went into full survival mode. I slammed the unlock button and bolted out of the car, running as fast as I could toward the road. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me, and I swear I could hear voices, low whispers, just barely audible. They were saying my name. I didn't stop running until I hit the main road. When I turned around, the Tesla was gone. At first, I thought maybe it had driven off on its own, but then I realized something even worse. The whispers hadn't stopped. They were still there, soft and persistent, coming from the trees lining the road. I pulled out my phone again, and thank God, I had a signal. I called my friend Mike, the only person I knew who would be awake that late. "Dude, you need to come get me," I gasped. "I'm near that old cemetery on Route 17. Mike didn't ask questions. He said he'd be there in 10 minutes. While I waited, I stayed on the phone with him, pacing back and forth under the dim glow of a streetlight. The whispers never got louder, but they didn't go away either. When Mike's car finally pulled up, I practically dove into the passenger seat. "Dude, what the hell happened to you?" he asked. I didn't know how to explain. "Just drive. I'll tell you later." The aftermath. When I got home, I was too shaken to sleep. I spent the rest of the night researching the cemetery, trying to figure out why the Tesla had taken me there. Turns out it's a well-known local haunt. People say it's cursed, that weird things happen if you visit after dark. I also searched for any info on the Tesla itself, but the VIN number didn't come up in any databases. It was like the car didn't exist. The next day, I went outside to see if it had come back. It hadn't. The driveway was empty, like I'd never owned the car in the first place. I don't know what happened to it, and honestly, I don't want to know. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear the sound of its horn in the distance, long and echoing. The morning after the cemetery incident, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. My body ached, my head pounded, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the events of the night before. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? "Hi, I bought a car from the dark web, and it drove me to a haunted cemetery where it vanished into thin air. Yeah, I'd be lucky if they didn't have me committed." Mike called around noon. "Dude, you seriously need to tell me what happened last night. You looked like you'd seen a ghost." I didn't tell him everything. I just said the car had malfunctioned and taken me to a weird place. Mike didn't press me for details, but I could tell he didn't fully buy my story. The rest of the day passed uneventfully. I worked from home, kept my blinds shut, and tried not to think about it. By the time night rolled around, I almost felt normal again. I convinced myself that the whole thing was just some bizarre prank, a really elaborate one, but still just a prank. Then, around 11 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the Tesla app. "Your Tesla has been parked nearby for 1 hour. Would you like to check its status?" I froze. My hands were shaking as I opened the app. The The screen loaded, and there it was, a live map showing the car's location. It wasn't in my driveway. It was a few streets over, parked on the corner of a cul-de-sac. I don't even know why I grabbed my jacket and went outside. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that it wasn't real, that the app was glitching. Whatever the reason, I found myself walking through the cold night air, my heart pounding with every step. When I turned onto the cul-de-sac, there it was. The Tesla was parked under a flickering streetlight, as pristine as the day it arrived. The passenger. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the car. Part of me wanted to run back home and pretend I never saw it, but another part of me, the stupid, curious part, decided to walk closer. The windows were tinted, so I couldn't see inside. I slowly circled the car, half expecting the doors to unlock or the screen to flash another creepy message, but nothing happened. It just sat there, silent and still. Finally, I worked up the nerve to try the key card. I pulled it from my pocket and held it up to the driver's side door. Click. The door unlocked. I don't know what I was expecting, but the inside looked completely normal. Same spotless seats, same massive touchscreen. The only difference was a faint smell, something metallic and sour. I slid into the driver's seat, my palms sweaty. The screen lit up immediately, and for a second, everything looked fine. Then I noticed the icon in the corner. Passenger detected. I turned to look at the passenger seat. It was empty. Nope, I whispered, reaching for the door handle. But before I could get out, the screen changed. It was a live feed from the car's interior camera, the one mounted above the rearview mirror. The feed showed me sitting in the driver's seat, looking pale and terrified. But it also showed something else. There was a figure in the back seat. I couldn't see its face. Its head was bowed, and long stringy hair hung down over its features. It was hunched forward, its hands gripping the back of the passenger seat like it was ready to lunge. I didn't even think. I threw the door open and ran, not looking back until I was halfway down the street. The Tesla's headlights flashed once, twice, then went dark. The strange calls. I didn't sleep that night. I locked every door, turned on every light in the house, and sat on my couch with a baseball bat. I kept checking the Tesla app, but the car's location didn't update. Around 3 a.m., my phone rang. The caller ID said, "Unknown number." At first I thought it was spam, but something made me answer. "Hello," I said, my voice shaky. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then a low, distorted voice whispered, "You shouldn't have left." I hung up and threw my phone across the room. The calls didn't stop. They came every hour, like clockwork. Sometimes there were voices, whispers, laughter, even my own name. Other times there was just static, like someone was breathing into the microphone. By sunrise, I was a wreck. I called Mike again, desperate for some kind of explanation or reassurance. "Dude, you need to come over," I begged. Mike agreed, though he sounded hesitant. "All right, but if this is about that car, I'm calling BS." The final warning. When Mike arrived, I tried explaining everything. He just stared at me, like I was insane. "Look, man," he said, "I think you've been watching too many horror movies. Maybe the car freaked you out, but it's gone now, right? Just forget about it." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But as we were talking, I noticed something on my front porch. It was a small black object, sitting neatly in the center of the welcome mat. Mike followed me to the door. "What is it?" I didn't answer. I already knew. It was the Tesla's key card. I didn't touch the key card. I just stood there, staring at it like it might jump up and bite me. Mike, of course, didn't understand the gravity of the situation. Dude, it's just a piece of plastic. Chill. He reached down to pick it up. Don't touch it, I snapped, probably louder than I intended. Mike froze, giving me this look like I'd completely lost it. Okay, you're officially freaking me out. What's the big deal? I didn't know how to explain it to him without sounding crazy. Instead, I grabbed a pair of kitchen tongs, carefully picked up the key card, and dropped it into a Ziploc bag. Mike watched me like I'd just grown a second head. All right, man, you need help. Like, professional help. Mike, listen to me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. That car isn't normal. It's not just some malfunction or prank. There's something wrong with it. And now, it's back. Mike sighed and rubbed his temples. Fine, let's prove it. We'll drive out to where you saw it last night and see if it's still there. If it's not, you owe me an apology and a six-pack. I wanted to tell him no, to just leave it alone, but I was too shaken to argue. Maybe part of me hoped he was right, that this whole thing was just in my head. So we got in Mike's car and headed for the cul-de-sac. The parking lot. It was early afternoon by the time we got there. The street was empty, the houses quiet. I pointed to the spot where the Tesla had been parked. Right there, I said. It was right there. Of course, the car was gone. See? Mike said, throwing his hands up. Nothing here. You're stressing over nothing. But something didn't feel right. The air was heavy, just like it had been at the cemetery. I glanced around, half expecting to see shadows moving behind the houses or that hunched figure lurking in the distance. Then Mike's phone buzzed. He pulled it out of his pocket, frowned, and held it up to show me. Weird. It's a notification from your Tesla app. My stomach dropped. I hadn't told him I'd connected the app to my phone. What does it say? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mike read it aloud. Passenger detected. Vehicle en route to your location. I backed away, my heart pounding. We need to leave. Now. Mike laughed nervously. Come on, man. It's just a glitch. Maybe the app's messing with your contacts or something. But as we turned to head back to his car, we heard it. The unmistakable sound of tires crunching over gravel. The chase. We both froze, turning toward the sound. There it was. The Tesla was creeping down the street, its headlights off, moving eerily slow. That's not possible, Mike whispered. Get in the car, I yelled, shoving him toward his vehicle. We scrambled inside, and Mike floored it. His car roared to life, peeling out of the cul-de-sac and onto the main road. I kept glancing over my shoulder, and sure enough, the Tesla was following us. It didn't speed up or swerve. It just glided along, perfectly smooth, keeping pace no matter how fast Mike drove. This has to be a prank, Mike said, his voice cracking. Someone's remote controlling it, or something. Does this feel like a prank to you? I shot back. The Tesla's headlights flickered on, illuminating the inside of Mike's car with blinding light. The horn blared, long and drawn out, just like at the cemetery. Mike cursed and took a sharp turn down a side street, trying to lose it. The Tesla followed effortlessly, never falling behind, never veering off course. Where the hell do we go? Mike shouted. Just keep driving, I yelled. But no matter where we went, side streets, back roads, even a freaking dirt trail, the Tesla stayed with us, like it was toying with us. The factory. Eventually, we ended up on the outskirts of town, near an old industrial area. Most of the factories had been abandoned for years, their windows boarded up, their parking lots overgrown with weeds. Mike skidded to a stop in front of one of the larger buildings, breathing hard. The Tesla stopped about 50 feet behind us, its headlights still burning. "What now?" Mike asked, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. I didn't have an answer. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of the situation. Then, the Tesla's driver's side door opened. I swear to God, no one was inside. The door just swung open on its own, creaking loudly in the silence. Mike and I stared, too stunned to move. Then, the whispers started again. They weren't coming from the Tesla this time. They were all around us, echoing off the factory walls, seeping through the cracks in the boarded-up windows. "Get out of the car," I whispered. "What?" Mike hissed. "Just trust me. Get out." We climbed out of Mike's car, and the whispers grew louder. They were speaking in broken fragments, like a dozen voices layered over each other. The Tesla's headlights dimmed, and the screen inside flickered to life. It displayed a single message. "Come closer." I didn't move. Neither did Mike. Then something stepped out of the Tesla. The thing. It wasn't human. It was tall and thin, its limbs impossibly long and bent at odd angles. Its face was blank. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth, pale skin. It moved unnaturally, like a puppet on strings, jerking forward a step at a time. Mike screamed. I don't blame him. I wanted to scream too, but my voice was caught in my throat. The thing reached into the Tesla and pulled something out. At first, I thought it was a person, but then I realized it was me. It was like looking into a warped mirror. The figure it dragged out looked exactly like me, but its eyes were hollow, and its skin was gray and lifeless. The whispers crescendoed, turning into an ear-piercing screech. I grabbed Mike's arm and bolted, running as fast as I could toward the factory. We didn't stop until we were deep inside the building, hiding behind a rusted conveyor belt. The screeching had stopped, but the whispers were still there, faint and mocking. Mike was trembling, his face pale. What the hell was that thing? I don't know, I said, my voice shaking. But it's not over. The factory was dark and suffocating, the air thick with the smell of rust and mildew. The whispers were everywhere now, circling us, growing louder and softer, like they were toying with us. I crouched behind the conveyor belt, trying to catch my breath, while Mike paced frantically, his hands clutching at his hair. We have to get out of here, he whispered. We can't stay here. I know, I said, my voice barely audible. But if we go back out there... I didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew what was waiting for us. For a while, we just sat there in silence, the whispers ebbing and flowing. Then, out of nowhere, there was a loud, metallic bang from somewhere deeper in the factory. Mike froze. What was that? I shook my head, listening. The sound came again, closer this time. It wasn't just a bang. It was footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps, echoing through the empty building. It's in here, Mike hissed. We have to move, I said, grabbing his arm. We crept through the factory, staying low and sticking to the shadows. The footsteps followed us, slow and steady, never too close, but never far enough away to feel safe. Eventually, we found a stairwell leading down to the basement. It wasn't a great option, but we didn't have many choices. We descended carefully, the stairs creaking under our weight. The basement was even darker than the rest of the factory. The only light came from a single flickering bulb near the far wall, casting long, jagged shadows across the floor. And in the center of the room was the Tesla, the basement, I don't know how it got there, and I didn't care. All I knew was that it was sitting there, headlights off, screen glowing faintly. "Do you see this?" Mike whispered, his voice trembling. "Yeah," I said. "I see it." The car was different now. The pristine black paint was streaked with rust, and the windows were cracked. The license plate, something I hadn't even thought to check before, was gone. I pulled Mike back into the shadows. "We can't go near it." He nodded, but his eyes were wide with fear, darting between me and the car. That's when the screen lit up. This time, it didn't display a map or a message. It showed live footage of the basement. Us. The camera feed was angled from above, like it was watching us from the ceiling. Mike and I both looked up, but there was nothing there. The screen flickered, and the view changed. It was the same basement, but now it was empty. No us, no Tesla, just the room. "What does that mean?" Mike whispered. Before I could answer, the car's horn blasted. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, echoing off the walls and making my ears ring. The lights on the Tesla flashed, illuminating the entire room. And that's when we saw them. The figures. They were everywhere, dozens of them, standing in the corners, crouched behind machinery, lurking in the shadows. They looked human, at least at first glance, but their movements were jerky and wrong, like they were being controlled by strings. Their faces were blank, just like the thing I'd seen at the cemetery. One of them stepped forward, its head twitching unnaturally. It raised an arm and pointed at us. "We need to run," Mike said, his voice barely audible. "Where?" I shot back. The figures were closing in now, their footsteps echoing in unison. The whispers were back, louder than ever, filling my head with nonsense words and broken sentences. Then the Tesla's screen flickered again. "Enter the vehicle." "No," I whispered, shaking my head. Mike grabbed my arm. "Do we have a choice?" The final ride. With no other option, we sprinted for the Tesla. The figures didn't follow us, but I could feel their blank stares burning into my back. The moment we climbed inside, the doors locked automatically. The screen lit up with a map. No destination, just a blank grid. The car started moving. It drove itself out of the basement, up the stairwell. Yes, up the freaking stairwell, and out onto the street. I don't know how that was even possible, but at this point, I'd stopped trying to make sense of anything. The car didn't obey traffic laws this time. It sped through red lights, swerved around other cars, and barreled down back roads like it was on a mission. "Where is it taking us?" Mike asked, gripping the armrest so hard his knuckles turned white. I didn't answer. I was too focused on the screen. The map wasn't blank anymore. It was displaying a single word, over and over again, filling every inch of the grid. Home. The return. After what felt like hours, the Tesla finally stopped. We were back at my house. The car shut off completely, the screen going dark. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the doors unlocked. "Get out," Mike said. I didn't need convincing. We stumbled out of the car, barely able to stand, and ran for the house. When I turned back, the Tesla was gone. The aftermath. It's been a week since that night. I haven't seen the Tesla again, but the nightmares haven't stopped. Every night, I dream of the basement, the figures, the whispers. And every morning, I wake up to find the keycard sitting on my nightstand. I've tried throwing it away, burning it, even smashing it with a hammer. But no matter what I do, it always comes back. Mike doesn't talk to me anymore. He won't answer my calls or texts, and I can't blame him. Whatever we got involved in that night, it's not over. I don't know what the car wanted or why it came to me in the first place. All I know is that it's out there somewhere, waiting, and I'm terrified it's coming back. I downloaded a Spotify playlist promoted on the dark web. The songs include lyrics about events in my life no one knows. Alright, let me preface this by saying I'm not someone who scares easily. I'm not a thrill seeker or anything, but I've seen my fair share of weird internet rabbit holes, conspiracy theories, unsettling subreddits, even a few sketchy deep web forums. Nothing ever really stuck with me. It was all just noise until now. It was a regular Tuesday night. I'd gotten home from work, ordered some Taco Bell, and settled in for my usual YouTube binge. You know how the algorithm always leads you somewhere weird after midnight? Well, that's how I stumbled onto this video. It was one of those top 10 disturbing internet mysteries things. Grainy footage, creepy music, and a guy with an overly dramatic voice. Most of it was the usual stuff. Creepy Craigslist ads, weird websites that crash your browser. But then they got to this segment about dark web playlists. The narrator started talking about how some people claim there are Spotify accounts on the dark web that can create playlists personalized to your life. Not just your music taste, your actual life, your secrets. I didn't think much of it at the time. It sounded like one of those urban legends, the kind you laugh about with friends. But then I scrolled to the comments, and that's where it got interesting. Someone had posted a link. It wasn't like a normal link to Spotify. It was this long random string of characters that led to a forum I'd never heard of. The top comment underneath was just one word. Don't. Naturally, I clicked it. The forum looked ancient, like something from the early 2000s, the kind of site that makes you paranoid about viruses the moment you see it. Most of the threads were dead, but one caught my eye. Personalized Spotify playlists, the soundtrack of your life. It had a single post, written by a user named The Melody Weaver. Do you believe in fate? Ever feel like someone's watching you? DM me for the link, but only if you're ready to face the music. It felt ridiculous. Like, obviously, it was some kind of prank, right? But I was curious. Too curious. Before I could overthink it, I made an account on the forum and sent them a message. Alright, I'm ready. What's the link? The reply came almost instantly. Once you start, you can't stop. Remember that. And then they sent me the link. The link took me to a Spotify profile. The account name was just a random string of numbers. No profile picture, no followers. The playlist was called Life Unplugged. I hesitated before clicking. The description gave me chills. Every song is a piece of your soul. It had 13 tracks. None of the titles made sense. Just weird names like The Drive and Window. No artist names, no album art, just the titles. I stared at it for a long time before finally pressing play. The first track was The Drive. It started out kind of chill. Lo-fi beats, soft guitar, nothing unusual. But then the lyrics kicked in and my stomach dropped. The singer described my car, not just in a generic way, but specifically. The scratches on the passenger door, the fuzzy dice hanging from the rearview mirror. Then they started talking about a specific memory. A late-night drive down Route 9, past the McDonald's, where I always stop for fries when I'm stressed. My heart was pounding. There was no way this was real. I paused the song, shaking. I told myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe I'd been hacked. Maybe someone was messing with me. but curiosity got the better of me, and I pressed play on the second track, Window. The opening line hit me like a punch to the gut. You close the curtains when you feel them watching. It was something I always did. Not because I lived in a bad area or anything, but because I'd always been paranoid about people looking in. And then it got worse. The song described my room, my exact room, the crooked lamp on my nightstand, the half-empty coffee mug on my desk. It even mentioned the dumb motivational poster on my wall that says, "Dream big, hustle hard." I slammed my laptop shut and just sat there, breathing heavily. My hands were shaking. How could anyone know this stuff? My Spotify account wasn't public. My social media didn't have any photos of my room. There was no way anyone could know these details. I decided to go back to the forum, but the thread was gone, completely wiped. Even my DM with the Melody Weaver had disappeared. It was like it had never existed. I should have stopped there. I should have deleted the playlist and pretended none of it ever happened. But something about it, I couldn't let it go. I pressed play on track 3, Static. That's when everything changed. I can't believe I'm writing this now, but I have to get it all out. I have to. If I don't, I feel like my head's going to explode. The third track, Static, wasn't like the others. It didn't even start like a normal song. The moment I hit play, the room filled with this low, buzzing hum. It sounded like the kind of feedback you get when you're too close to a microphone. You know that high-pitched whine that makes your teeth clench? Yeah, that. At first, I thought it was just a glitch. I mean, the playlist was already weird enough. Maybe it was unfinished or something. But then, underneath the hum, I started to hear voices. They weren't singing. They were whispering. It was faint at first, like a conversation happening in another room. I leaned in closer to my laptop, trying to make out the words. The whispers grew louder. At first, it was gibberish, broken phrases, fragments of sentences. But then, one of the voices said my name. Not just my first name, my full name. I froze. Every hair on my body stood on end. My heart started pounding in my chest so hard, I thought it might explode. Then, another voice spoke. It was softer, calmer, but somehow worse. It said, "You should have turned off your webcam." I whipped my head toward my phone, which was sitting on my desk, propped up against my coffee mug. The screen was dark, but the camera, it was facing me. I reached for it, fumbling like my hands didn't work. I slammed it face down onto the desk and threw my hoodie over it for good measure. My laptop's webcam was taped over. It had been for years. But the phone? The phone had been sitting there, watching me the entire time. I slammed the laptop shut and sat there in silence, trying to catch my breath. My pulse was racing, and my mind was spinning with 100 questions. Was someone watching me? How? Was this some kind of sick prank? But the whispers hadn't stopped. Even with my laptop closed, I could still hear them. They were faint now, like they were coming from inside the walls. My first thought was that I'd lost it completely. I'd been up too late, messing around with creepy internet nonsense, and now my brain was playing tricks on me. But then I saw it, the light. It was just a tiny glow at first, barely noticeable in the corner of my vision. I turned toward it slowly, my stomach twisting into knots. It was coming from my Bluetooth speaker. Let me explain something. I keep that speaker on my nightstand, but I hadn't used it in weeks. It was off. I was sure of it. But now, the little blue light on the front was blinking. I stared at it, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe it had turned on by itself, or maybe I'd accidentally pressed the power button earlier. I reached over to switch it off, but as soon as my hand touched it, the static came back. Not from the speaker, from my laptop. I nearly jumped out of my chair. The laptop, which I'd closed less than a minute ago, had turned itself back on. The screen was lit up, and Spotify was open again. The playlist was still there, but something was different. The tracklist had changed. The first 3 songs were still the same, but the rest, they were gone. In their place was a new track titled Listen Closely. I didn't touch anything. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't even move the mouse. But then the song started playing on its own. It wasn't music. It was a recording. The audio was scratchy, like it had been pulled from an old tape recorder. I couldn't make out much at first, just the faint sound of footsteps and the occasional creak, like someone walking through a house. And then I heard it. My voice. I swear to God, it was my voice. The recording sounded like it had been taken from a phone call, but I couldn't remember when. I could hear myself talking, laughing nervously, saying things like, "Yeah, no, I'll be home soon. And don't wait up, okay?" It was my voice, but it wasn't anything I remembered saying. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Then there was a loud bang, like a door slamming shut. I jumped so hard, I nearly knocked my chair over. The whispers started again, this time louder and clearer than before. They weren't coming from my laptop or my speaker. They were coming from everywhere. And then I heard it, right behind me. A single voice. "Turn around." I didn't. I couldn't. My body was frozen in place. I wanted to get up, to run, to throw my laptop out the window, but I couldn't even move. The air in the room felt heavy, like I was being watched by 1,000 invisible eyes. I could feel it. Something behind me. The voice spoke again, closer this time. "You're not listening." I don't know how long I sat there, paralyzed with fear. Minutes? Hours? I honestly don't remember. But at some point, the static stopped. The whispers faded. The air felt lighter. When I finally mustered the courage to look at my laptop, the playlist was gone. The Spotify account had been deleted, just like the forum thread. I don't know what's happening to me, but I feel like I've crossed some kind of line. I've been hearing whispers in my house ever since. Faint, distant, but always there. And that voice, it keeps saying the same thing. Turn around. If I thought things couldn't get worse after that night, I was wrong. So wrong. I didn't sleep after the whispers. How could I? Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the pipes, every little sound made me jump. I sat in my chair, knees pulled up to my chest, staring at my laptop like it might spring to life again. When morning finally came, I told myself I'd imagined it all. Maybe I'd been too tired. Maybe I'd gotten lost in the creepy playlist and scared myself. It was stupid. It wasn't real. But then I got the email. It came around 9 a.m. The subject line read, "Are you listening now?" I almost didn't open it. I was still jittery, my heart racing from every little sound, but my curiosity got the better of me. The email was from an address I didn't recognize. Just another random string of numbers and letters, like the Spotify account. The body of the message was empty, but there was an attachment. A single MP3 file titled For You.mp3. I knew better than to open it. I knew. But my hands moved on their own, like I didn't have control over them anymore. I downloaded the file and clicked play. It was my voice again. Not a recording this time. It was live. "You don't even realize, do you?" my voice said. It was calm, eerily calm. I froze, staring at the empty email, like it might explain what was happening. But the voice kept talking. It's all been planned. Every step, every song, every choice you've made. You're following the script perfectly. My stomach twisted into knots. What script? I whispered. The voice on the recording laughed. That's cute. You think you're in control. I slammed my laptop shut and shoved it across the desk. My breath was coming in short, panicked gasps. This wasn't just creepy anymore. It was personal. I spent the rest of the day trying to shake the feeling that I was being watched. I checked my phone, my laptop, even my smart TV, but nothing seemed out of place. Everything was normal, but it didn't feel normal. That night, I went out for a drive to clear my head. I didn't even care where I was going. I just needed to get out of the house. I ended up on the highway, passing the same McDonald's I'd been to 1,000 times before. It was almost comforting, seeing something so familiar. But then I noticed the car. It was a black sedan, a few car lengths behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it. But as I drove, I realized it was staying with me. Every turn I made, every lane change, it was there. I started to panic. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly they hurt. I made a sharp turn into a gas station, hoping the car would pass me, but it didn't. It pulled in behind me. I sat there in my car, staring at the sedan through the rearview mirror. The windows were tinted, so I couldn't see who was inside. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might explode. Then the headlights blinked. Once, twice. It felt like a signal. I didn't wait to find out. I threw the car into reverse, backed out of the gas station, and sped down the road as fast as I could. The sedan didn't follow me, but when I got home, there was a package waiting on my doorstep. I live in an apartment complex, so packages aren't exactly unusual, but this one didn't have any shipping labels or markings. It was just a plain brown box with my name written on it in shaky, uneven handwriting. I stared at it for a long time, debating whether I should even touch it. Eventually, my curiosity got the better of me. I brought it inside and set it on the kitchen counter. Inside was a pair of headphones. They looked old, like something from the 80s. The foam padding on the earpieces was cracked, and the wire was frayed in a few places. Taped to the headphones was a note. "Put them on. You'll understand." I threw the headphones back into the box and shoved it into the closet. No way in hell was I touching them. That night, I tried to sleep, but it was impossible. The whispers were back, louder this time. They didn't seem to be coming from anywhere specific. It was like they were in my head, echoing from inside my skull. "Turn around." That voice, again. I squeezed my eyes shut, clutching my blanket like a lifeline. I wasn't going to look. I wasn't. But then my phone buzzed. I reached for it instinctively, desperate for any distraction. There was a new message from an unknown number. "You didn't listen." Attached to the message was a photo. It was a picture of me, sitting in bed, clutching my blanket. I don't remember much after that. I think I screamed. Maybe I threw the phone. All I know is that I spent the rest of the night curled up in the corner of my room, staring at the door like something might burst through it at any moment. By morning, the photo was gone. So was the message. I don't know what's happening to me. I don't know who's behind this, or why they're doing it, but one thing's for sure. They're not going to stop. I didn't go to work the next day. Hell, I barely left my room. I was too scared to move, too scared to open my laptop, or even check my phone. Someone was watching me, and no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being played like a pawn in some twisted game. By the afternoon, I realized I couldn't just sit there forever. I needed to figure out what was happening. I grabbed my laptop, hesitated for a moment, and then opened it. I half expected another email, another song, another voice. But nothing happened. For once, the screen stayed blissfully normal. I started Googling everything I could think of. Weird Spotify playlists, dark web music, being stalked online. But all I found were generic conspiracy theories and Reddit threads filled with people laughing at the idea of curse music. Nothing that explained what I was going through. That's when I remembered the headphones. I went to the closet and pulled out the box. My hands were shaking as I opened it. The headphones sat there, looking as old and battered as before. The note was still taped to them. Put them on. You'll understand. I didn't want to. Every part of me screamed not to. But I couldn't ignore the nagging thought that this might be the only way to get answers. So I plugged them into my laptop. As soon as I put them on, I heard a faint hum, like an old radio struggling to find a station. It wasn't coming from anything on my computer. It was just there, like the headphones had their own signal. The hum grew louder, and then the whispers started again. They were clearer this time, like the static had been stripped away. And they weren't just random voices anymore. They were familiar. My mom, my best friend, my old roommate. They were all saying the same thing. Why didn't you listen? The voices overlapped, growing louder and louder until they were shouting in my ears. I ripped the headphones off, but the sound didn't stop. It was everywhere now, filling the room like some kind of horrible symphony. My laptop screen flickered, and a video started playing. It was me. The video showed me sitting at my desk, headphones on, staring blankly at the screen. But there was something wrong. My reflection in the screen wasn't moving the way I was. In the video, I smiled. Not me. The reflection. It leaned closer, its eyes wide and unblinking, its grin stretching unnaturally across its face. And then, in the same calm, steady voice I'd heard in the songs, it spoke. We're getting closer. The screen went black. I threw the headphones across the room and slammed my laptop shut. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. But then the power went out. The entire apartment went pitch black. The only light was the faint glow of my phone, which I'd left on the nightstand. I grabbed it, desperate for any connection to the outside world, and turned on the flashlight. That's when I saw it. There was something written on the wall above my bed. It hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. The letters were jagged, uneven, like they'd been scratched into the drywall. They spelled out one word. Listen. I stumbled back, tripping over my chair and nearly dropping my phone. My flashlight flickered for a moment, and when it came back on, the writing was gone. I couldn't stay there. I grabbed my keys, threw on a jacket, and bolted out the door. The parking lot was empty, except for my car and a single streetlight that flickered ominously overhead. I got into my car, locked the doors, and just sat there, trying to catch my breath. The silence was deafening. I started the engine, but as soon as I did, the radio turned on by itself. At first, it was static, the same low hum I'd heard in the headphones. But then a voice came through, crackling and distorted. We're not done yet. I slammed the power button, but the radio wouldn't turn off. The static grew louder, filling the car, until it sounded like something was trying to claw its way out of the speakers. And then the headlights turned off. I was plunged into darkness. The only light came from my phone, which buzzed with a new notification. It was a text from the same unknown number as before. This time, it was a video. I didn't want to watch it. I didn't. But my thumb hovered over the screen, like I didn't have a choice. The video showed my apartment. The camera panned slowly through the living room, down the hallway, and into my bedroom. And then it stopped. The camera focused on the headphones, still lying on the floor where I'd thrown them. But there was something else in the shot. Something standing just behind the headphones. It was a shadow, not a person, not even a figure. Just a shadow, long and impossibly dark, stretching across the floor like it had been burned into the carpet. And then the video ended. I threw my phone onto the passenger seat and gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go home. I couldn't call anyone. Who would even believe me? And then, in the silence of the car, I heard it. The faint hum of static coming from somewhere deep inside the radio. I stayed in the car for hours, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. The static from the radio was faint now, a low buzz that seemed to seep into the air around me. I could feel it vibrating in my chest, like my heartbeat had synced with it. At some point, I must have convinced myself it wasn't real. Or maybe I just got desperate enough to believe it. I started driving, not caring where I ended up. I couldn't go back to my apartment, and I wasn't sure I'd ever feel safe there again. The streets were empty. Every shop I passed was dark, every house silent. It felt like the entire city had been swallowed up by the same shadow from the video. And then I saw it. Up ahead, on the side of the road, there was a figure. At first, I thought it was just someone walking, but as I got closer, I realized they weren't moving. They were standing perfectly still, their back to me, bathed in the pale yellow light of a flickering street lamp. Something about the way they stood, rigid, unnatural, made my skin crawl. I slowed the car, unsure of what to do. I didn't want to stop, but as I tried to steer around them, the radio crackled to life again. "Don't leave yet." My hands froze on the wheel. The voice was different this time, soft, almost gentle, but there was something cold and hollow beneath it. The figure turned. Their face. It wasn't right. It was like a bad rendering in a video game, blurry, incomplete. Their features flickered in and out like they couldn't decide what they wanted to be. But their eyes stayed the same. Black, empty. They started walking toward the car. I slammed my foot on the gas, swerving around them and speeding down the road as fast as I could. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it might burst. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the figure running after me, but the road was empty. For a moment, I thought I was safe, and then the static came back. This time, it wasn't just the radio, it was everywhere. The car speakers, my phone, even the air itself. It felt like the entire world was vibrating with it. The voice came through again, louder now, and so clear it felt like it was coming from inside my own head. "You can't run from this. You never could." The static grew louder, sharper, until it felt like needles stabbing into my ears. I screamed, slamming my fists against the steering wheel, but the sound drowned out everything else. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence was deafening. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. For a long moment, I just sat there, trying to catch my breath. That's when I noticed the phone. It was sitting on the passenger seat, screen glowing faintly. A new notification had appeared, another playlist. The title was different this time. Final track. There was only one song, and it didn't have a title. Just a blank space where the name should have been. I didn't want to play it. I didn't even want to touch my phone. But something inside me, curiosity, desperation, whatever it was, made me tap the screen. The song started with a single note, high-pitched, drawn out, like the sound of a tuning fork, and then a voice. Do you understand now? The voice wasn't distorted anymore. It wasn't coming from the radio or my phone. It was coming from everywhere. The song didn't have lyrics, not exactly. Instead, it was a series of sounds, footsteps, creaking floorboards, the hum of fluorescent lights, all sounds from my life. And then I heard it, my own voice, whispering, "You should have turned around." I looked up, and my breath caught in my throat. The road ahead wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with figures, dozens of them, standing perfectly still under the flickering streetlights. They all turned toward me at once. Their faces were the same, blurry, incomplete, their eyes black and empty. But they were all staring at me, and then, in unison, they spoke. "Listen." The lights in the car flickered, and the static came back, louder than ever. The figures started moving, walking toward the car in slow, deliberate steps. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. And then, the final sound came through the speakers, a door creaking open. When I woke up, I was back in my apartment. The headphones were on my desk, the note taped to them. The playlist was gone, the email was gone, and my phone had been wiped clean. But the whispers haven't stopped. Every night when the house is quiet, I hear them. Faint, distant, but always there. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still hear that voice, soft and steady, echoing in the back of my mind. "You're still listening, aren't you?"